I will be discussing some Fire and Blood spoilers at the end of this video, but I will have another warning when I do. Alright, so I'm just going to start off with what is actually my biggest complaint about the episode. And I really hate to say this, because when I read about how they were going to do a new opening credits, and it was going to be a Bayou Tapestry style embroidery of Targaryen history, I was so excited. I love embroidery. I love Targaryen history. Thank you so much for doing this for me specifically. It was an excellent concept that I think was very poorly executed. They clearly did not work with any actual embroidery artists or people who understand how embroidery looks, and the final results are incredibly sloppy. The images aren't particularly legible. It's just a huge disappointment. It was really cool to try to figure out what all the little scenes were, but with the camera moving so quickly and not being able to focus on any particular image for too long, the images need to really be legible, and the design of this tapestry just was not good. It's an embroidery, not a tapestry. You know what? I'm not going to get into semantics about the term tapestry. I'm not going to do that. They tried to go for an expressionistic embroidery style to match, I think, the style of Michelle Carragher, who is the wonderful, incredibly talented embroidery artist who works on the costumes for this show. But that style doesn't really translate to the digital animation they tried to use. And like I said, they didn't work with any actual embroidery artists, so the techniques were weird. And leading into my other least favorite part of the episode, which it pains me to say, but the sequence in the north left me a bit cold. I love the lore implications that Torrhen Stark was potentially told of Aegon's prophecy and the coming war in the north. That's really cool. It was cool to see the wall again and to see Jace, who is this show's Jon Snow, at the wall. Really cool. So glad that he lost his flat iron somewhere along the way there, because his hair looks amazing. I was not fully sold on Cregan Stark. I know it's just a short scene. Maybe I'll like him more when he comes back in later seasons, because apparently this is all we're getting for this season. Okay, and this is my last pedantic nitpick, I swear, but the wall on the show is not 700 feet high. Why would you lift that from the book if you are not going to actually change the wall to make it 700 feet high?
Do you think my ancestors built a 700-foot wall of ice to keep out snow and savages?
The wall here is still about the same height that it was in Game of Thrones, and that's more like 300 feet because I did the math. I don't even care that they changed it from the book. I get why, for practical shooting reasons, for, I don't know, visual, I don't fucking know this shit. I get why they would change that, but then don't say that it's 700 feet tall. They also changed the location where Torrhen Stark bent the knee to Aegon the Conqueror, from being at the Trident to being at the Wall, and I like that. I think that's a good change. It's very thematically relevant with the story. I just thought that the sequence was kind of a clunky start to this episode, which overall I thought was very good. Okay, so I'm going to start off with the teamblack portion of the story, and I want to make it clear because I haven't really talked about her very much. I do overall prefer the characters on the green side. I think they're more interesting, but I still love Rhaenyratargaryen. This is not a safe space for Rhaenyra haters. Take that shit elsewhere. All of my notes for the Rhaenyra sections just say Emma in all caps, because Emma Darcy was phenomenal here. They really brought Rhaenyra's grief to life and made it so visceral and raw. Just an incredible performance. I also want to shout out Rhaenyra's burgundy leather coat. I thought that was a gorgeous costume piece. Overall, the costumes have improved so much this season, and I am so grateful, but I thought that one was a real standout. If I did cosplay, I'd want to make that. It's so cool. I really liked Rhaenyra's dragon dismount move. The effect looked a little bit wonky, but it does remind the audience that Rhaenyra is in fact an incredibly skilled and experienced dragon rider, I really hope that the show will utilize that more than the book did. It seems like they will. But yeah, it's great to see my girl Cyrax looking good. It hasn't actually been confirmed whether Arax came from one of Cyrax's eggs, but I do love that theory because it means that Cyrax is also mourning not only for Luke, whose birth she experienced along with Rhaenyra, but for her own child. I mean, it crushes me and devastates me, but I love it. I loved Cyrax's somewhat crash landing on the beach, not only because it conveys Rhaenyra's haste, but it also reemphasizes that dragons are blunt instruments and there is often collateral damage when they are used. I liked the way that the shot of Rhaenyra's entrance into the throne room mirrored the one from last season.
Rhaenyratargaryen, first of her name. Queen of the Andals and Rhaenyra and the First Men. Lady of the Seven Kingdoms and Protector of the Realm.
Rhaenyratargaryen, first of her name. Queen of the Andals and the Rhaenyra and the First Men. Lady of the Seven Kingdoms and Protector of the Realm.
Emma Darcy just conveys so much with their body language. You can just feel Rhaenyra's grief viscerally. It's incredible. Give them all of the Emmys. I did think that the moment between Rhaenyra and Daemon was touching. Look, I am a fan of this relationship as an on-screen dynamic. I think it's very compelling, but I also do want to tell Rhaenyra Targaryen about divorce. I think that would be a good reform for her to bring to Westeros in her reign as queen. This relationship is toxic as hell, but there is clearly some deep feeling between these people, and it is nice to see little moments that reflect that. I do wish we could have seen more reactions of people in the throne room to Rhaenyra, especially Baela and Rhaena, especially Rhaena because Luke was her betrothed and she clearly cared about him quite a bit. Her face during the funeral scene just broke my heart. I also wanted to talk about the specificity of the 4 words that Rhaenyra did speak here.
I want Aemondtargaryen.
And I do think that specific choice of words is interesting, that she specifically says Aemond Targaryen and not just Aemond or Prince Aemond. It's formal and detached. Rhaenyra has never really seen her half-siblings as her real family, and that distance has always been apparent in the way she talks about them. I mean, Aemond did just murder her son. She has every right to disown him as a brother. That's just not chill bro behavior. I thought that the reunion scene between Rhaenyra and Jace was the best scene in the episode. Just completely broke my heart. The way he tries to be the dutiful prince and talk about the alliances he made and just breaks down. It reminded me of the scene between Robb and Kat after Ned's death in Game of Thrones, which is the highest praise I could give it. Incredible performances from Harry Collette and Emma Darcy. I'm completely destroyed. Obviously, the loss of Luke was at the core of the Black storyline in this episode. We also saw that in the scene with Corlys and Alan receiving the dagger that he had commissioned for Luke. Corlys absolutely did love Luke, despite knowing that he was not his blood. He accepted him as his heir, and this was a devastating loss for him as well. It was also a good reminder of his character, the way that he immediately wants to get back out there with his ship, even though it's clearly busted. Corlys has always been a doer, someone who wanted to build his own worth with his own hands, so to speak. I don't think he literally built any ships. Going off to war was how he coped with the death of his own children, and he clearly hates being on the sidelines and feeling powerless. I also loved what we got of Rhaenys in this episode, the scene between her and Daemon. I absolutely loved their dynamic. It was very cousins. She is one of the only people who can actually put him in his place like that.
Fly with me. It is a command.
Would that you were the king.
Her bringing up the grief she felt over Lena's passing was also very poignant here, and how you need something physical before it can become real. I also loved Daemon's line of "the mother grieves as the queen shirks her duties," because yes, Rhaenyra is absolutely allowed to grieve the loss of her son. She needs to. But now, as queen, she is expected to be two different people. Love is the death of duty, etc. I think that's a wonderful tension and something that's going to be meaningful going forward in this story. So let's talk about Daemon, because I do really like Daemon. I think he's a really interesting character, and Matt Smith is incredibly winning in this role. I love chaos demons, but his plan making skills lead something to be desired. Obviously, Rhaenyra is not ultimately responsible for what happened to Jaehaerys. That's on Daemon and the assassins who literally killed him. But I do think that a theme of the show is going to be the spiraling consequences of desiring vengeance, and how once you unleash a violent force, you cannot control it, just like with Aemond and vhagar. The book changes to the blood and cheese storyline made it more carelessly brutal and also a lot dumber. So basically, in the book, Helena's children are always the target because basically no one knows a way to get into Maegor's holdfast. They go after Helena's children because they do know a way to get into the Tower of the Hand, and that is where Alicent's quarters are in the book, and Helaena brings her children around to see their grandmother every night. But in the show, there are secret passageways into Maegor's holdfast that Daemon knows about. There is literally a secret door that opens up directly into Aemon's quarters. And I think that this makes this plotline dumber and more wantonly violent, because even if you put revenge aside, killing Aemond is the best possible strategic move that the Blacks could make. It would completely cripple the green forces. It's so much easier than killing vhagar. So the fact that they didn't make a better effort to kill Aemond is just dumb. Like, if he's not there, you wait for him. You try again tomorrow night. Aemond is a big enough target that they should be putting in more effort to kill him. I'm sorry, I love that menace, but that's really the move here. It's the best way to prevent an all-out war. So I just wanted to quickly go over what I think Daemon's actual plan was here, because I've seen people describe Jaehaerys' death as an accident or an unintended consequence, but I don't think that's it. Yes, Daemon did not directly say, if you can't find Aemond, go after Jaehaerys, but we know that he did say something with a son for a son, no head, no reward. And without Maelor, there's 3 people who could qualify as the son in this place: Aemond, Aegon, and Jaehaerys. And Jaehaerys is certainly the easiest target of the 3. The fact that Blood and Cheese were the 2 guys he sent shows that he wasn't particularly serious about killing Aemond, because he definitely could have found some better assassins. He's super rich. He fully knew and accepted the possibility that they could kill this 4-year-old child. It was not an accident. There's even a question as to whether that was maybe what he wanted all along, given the completely clueless dudes he sent on this mission. He kind of seems to want a war to break out, and killing this child guarantees that. Alright, so moving on to the King's Landing Team Green storyline. I'm going to start out with the People's Princess, Aegon II. Aegon was fantastic in this episode. I think Tom Glencarney absolutely killed it. He has quickly become the funniest character on this show, and I do think that's important in a storyline as dark as this one, to have some levity. It definitely seemed like in the first season that Aegon didn't really give a crap about his kids. And I'm not going to say he's father of the year. He clearly knows nothing about them. He has no idea that his son goes to the library every single day. But he is trying. He wants to be better than his father. Now, I'm not going to call him father of the year. He clearly has not been involved in these kids' lives up till this point. He has no idea that Jaehaerys goes to the library every single morning. But it was lovely to see him try, to see that he wants to be better than his own father, who completely neglected him. Aegon has accepted his fate of being the king and accepted that his son will be king after him, and he wants to prepare him in a way that he was never prepared. And we see in this episode that Aegon is not evil, he's just kind of dumb.
Perhaps we could just return his sheep. He came all this way.
If you return one herd of sheep, Your Grace, you'll soon find them all at the foot of your throne expecting the same.
They won't know.
Aegon probably could have been a competent king if he had actually been prepared for the position. He does seem to want what is best for the people, and whether that comes from a genuine compassion, or rather more likely because they can give him the love and the validation he's never got from his own family, that's a good thing. And he does clearly love his children. I love that this show is going into the resources that it takes to maintain dragons. We saw this with Rhaenys and Meleys, and we see in the throne room scene that there is a tangible cost to the small folk to maintain these dragons, not to mention that they could get crushed to death at a coronation. So about Alicent, you know what? Good for her. I mean, I wish it was with someone else, but I have eyes. I get it. I'm really going to hold off on judgment on this one till we see more what it means for the story. I do think it makes sense for these characters. They are both repressed, hypocritical people. They are both human. And I feel like I need to reiterate this because I have seen people saying some shit. Obviously, Alicent is hypocritical. I would never say that she isn't, and I love her. But I've seen so many people acting like Alicent's primary motivation there was shaming Rhaenyra for having sex out of marriage, when it was about the fact that she was literally doing high treason. Presenting bastards as legitimate heirs to the throne is high treason in this world. We may, as modern audiences, see that all of these rules are stupid, but from the Watsonian perspective, Alicent was 100% in the right there. Now, Rhaenyra was doing that to protect her children. I don't blame her. She is also a mother. But Alicent had every right to feel furious and gaslit because Rhaenyra was literally stealing her son's birthrights by all the rules of this world. And that treason does put Alicent's sons at risk due to the high likelihood of a succession crisis when Jace tries to take the throne.
Have I lost my sanity, Sir Criston? Do my senses lead me astray, or is everyone else asleep, dreaming the same woolly dream?
Sometimes seems so, Your Grace.
Alicent is hypocritical, water is wet, but that doesn't mean misrepresenting her actions and wholly disregarding the context of how this world works. And it's honestly classic cristoncole that he's getting laid and still on his incel shit, and he's still using the same spider metaphor that he used 16 years ago.
A spider who stings and sucks her prey dry.
Rhaenyra is a cunning spider. Long ago, she drew Alicent into her web.
Get a new metaphor, dude. That's rude to Helaena and spiders. It shows his insane level of projection and how he needs to view Rhaenyra as this cunning and manipulative villain in order to justify his own actions to himself. It also goes to show that he just doesn't understand the relationship between Alicent and Rhaenyra. Alicent is once again coming up against the limitations of her own power in realizing that she is losing influence over her sons. Aemond talks about how it is very hypocritical of his mother to blame him for starting the war when she was the one who was conspiring with the small council to put Aegon on the throne.
She blames me for starting this war, after she plotted with my father's council to usurp his throne. Her Grace speaks with two tongues.
And he does have a point there. He may have lit the spark, but other people are the ones who left around a whole ton of dry kindling and scraps of birch bark. Something was bound to go up in flames. But what I find most interesting about this line is that we as an audience know that that's not really true. The small council was conspiring to put Aegon on the throne behind Alicent's back for years, and she went along with it. She doesn't bear no responsibility for what happened, but it goes to show how history will remember her as an equal collaborator, will remember her as having power and agency that she didn't really have. Fire and Blood makes it out like Alicent was the central instigator behind the Green Coup. The scenes between Alicent and Otto are always very interesting, and Otto isn't entirely wrong in his critique of Alicent's actions here.
Well, we should have just killed her when we had the chance.
Regrettably, the opportunity for surprise has been lost, and with it the chance to end this conflict quickly. We must play the board before us.
If we are...
What the Greens did was a half measure. If they wanted to take power and prevent a war from breaking out, the best way to do that would have been to kill Rhaenyra and her family. Now that's horrible, and I don't want that, but it would have been better for the realm than an all-out dragon war. I also can't say that Alicent totally did the wrong thing there. Like she said, reluctance to murder is not a weakness. There was a solid chance of Rhaenyra accepting the peace terms until Aemond went and did a murder. But it is true that in trying to prevent bloodshed, Alicent inadvertently created the conditions for greater bloodshed to occur. Many characters on this show already feel like war is inevitable and that the people dragging their feet are just wasting time while the other side can gain an advantage, and we see this the most from Aemond and Daemon. Now this might be kind of an out there tinfoil theory, but I do think the show is implying some kind of a parallel between those two characters. We see they're both intent on taking the Riverlands, and Harrenhal in particular.
Path to King's Landing is through the Riverlands. We must establish a toehold there. At Harrenhal.
The Riverlord. I will fly to Harrenhal at your command and set our toehold in the Riverlands.
And yeah, someone should go to Harrenhal. I bet it's really cool there, but there's someone cool. Obviously, both of them have intimidating and tough and impressive qualities. I would not want to be on the bad side of either one, but I do think it is funny that ultimately both of them are just kind of weird losers. Aemon's only friends are a 180-year-old dragon and the bodyguard who's fucking his mom. It is interesting that there is not too much overlap in the Venn diagram of fans of Aemond and Daemon, given their similarities. I would consider myself to be a fan of both characters. I love psychotic blondes, and I'm correct for that, but I do strongly prefer Aemond, and I think that's for a couple of reasons. First off, I just think that kind of behavior is a lot more understandable in a character who is ostensibly a teenager instead of someone who's 50. Aemond is an 18-year-old who was born 15 years ago. Yes, they exist. It makes sense that he is so impulsive. Also, because we saw his formative childhood trauma, I get why he's like that. Whereas with Daemon, it's like, okay, so your brother never needed you the way you wanted to be needed. Kind of seems like you're just an asshole. Both of them are ostensibly loyal to their families, or at least to the side of their family that they fall on. I have some questions about that. I'm not so sure. The episode goes out of its way a couple times to have characters say how loyal Aemond is.
Aemon erred. But he is fiercely loyal. He wishes to please myself.
I only wish to serve my king and my house.
My brother at least knows his place. He's as loyal as a hound.
Which makes me feel like they are setting something up, and we're gonna see maybe what the limitations of that loyalty are. It seems like at this point, Aegon basically just sees Aemond as a weapon. He can point at whatever.
The Riverlords will either declare for me, or they will meet vhagar and Sunfyre together. And we can burn the blockade while we're at it. Yeah. That treasonous blockade won't last long. I plan to send vhagar to burn it to ash. I can set him and his dragon on my foes at will.
Both Aemond and Daemon are kind of the attack dogs of their respective factions. Daemon has a really cool mural of the burning of Harrenhal in his quarters, and that made me wonder if these are Daemon's former quarters. That's my new headcanon, actually, just because I think it would be very funny, like this cosplaying little dork. Okay, now let's talk about my girl Helaena, who deserved none of this. As someone who has actually read the book, you guys, I was expecting something a little different from the Blood and Cheese sequence. Okay, so just a brief overview of how Blood and Cheese goes down in the book. So like I said earlier, in the book, there is no known way to get into Maegor's holdfast, so they don't go after Aegon or Aemond. They do know a way into the Tower of the Hand, however, and that is where Alicent's quarters are, and Helaena brings her children around every evening to see their grandmother. So they sneak into Alicent's quarters via a secret passage of some sort. They kill a couple guards and her maids, they tie her up, and they wait for Helaena and the children to arrive. In the book, Helaena has a second son, a younger child, who's around 2 at the time, I believe, who is named Maelor. It's very unclear as to whether he'll be on the show. When Helaena and the children arrive, they seize them, hold them at knife point, make all kinds of horrible threats, and they ask Helaena to choose which of her sons, Jaehaerys or Maelor, should die. Helaena tries to bargain, she offers her own life, she screams and cries, but eventually she chooses Maelor to die. It's unclear as to why she did that, if it was because Jaehaerys was the heir, or Maelor is just so much younger, so he doesn't understand what is happening to him. So either Blood or Cheese says to Maelor, "Do you hear that, little boy? Your mother wants you dead." And then they kill Jaehaerys instead. So then there's this double horror for Helaena of having this surviving son who she knows she chose to die. It talks about how after that she cannot even bring herself to look at Maelor, and that Alicent takes over his care. So there is some additional horror and trauma and spectacle in the book version. This sequence as it plays out in the books would be legally and ethically impossible to film with actual young children. This is something I know that Ryan Condal brought up discussing the adaptational changes. That was something I was actually wondering about going into this season, is how the hell are they going to adapt this without traumatizing real life kids? So yeah, I'm glad they changed it for that reason. So when I first saw it, I found it a little bit underwhelming because I was expecting it to be more like the book. But then when I went back and rewatched it without the expectation for it to be something else, I thought it was incredible. Thea Saban just completely blew me away with just her eyes and the horror she conveyed. And I think that this just makes so much more sense for the Helaena as we have gotten her so far on the show. It wouldn't really work for this Helaena to be screaming and crying and rending her clothes. The quiet detachment and horror works so much better for the character. I have seen people asking, well, why didn't Helaena do anything if she knew what was going to happen? But that's not how her visions work. I don't think she has anything actionable. It's just bits and pieces and images that don't actually make any sense till the actual events occur. Just think of her previous prophecies, like Aemond would have to close an eye to get a dragon, or there is a beast beneath the boards. None of those things would make sense to anyone who heard them until the actual events happened. We hear her expressing fear over the rats, and when Aegon comes into the room to look for Jaehaerys, she is actually muttering, "They only want the boy." So she does have some idea that something is going to happen, but she does not know the actual events that will occur. And it is worth pointing out that knowing a prophecy has never helped anyone in this universe prevent it from actually happening. Her dreams might be part of why she seems so resigned when it is actually happening, and why she gives up Jaehaerys so easily, Now that she knows the context of what "they only want the boy" means, she knows that they will not hurt her or Jaehaera, so she detaches and she does what she needs to do to save one of her children. Likewise with her final line of saying "they killed the boy," she has to detach herself from the horrifying reality she is experiencing. I also liked how that line was 4 words to match up with Rhaenyra's 4 words of "I want aemondtargaryen." Together they kind of sum up this episode like one of those 2-sentence horror stories.
I want Aemond Targaryen.
They killed the boy.
And the phrase "kill the boy" does remind us of the main series and Maester Aemon's words to Jon Snow upon becoming Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, that he must kill the boy and let the man be born. It's about doing what you need to do and becoming the person you need to become to survive the challenges the world presents. Now I want to quickly go over some of the themes of this episode, so I'm going to do a short 8th grade book report here. The first theme: winter is coming. I mean, we start off at Winterfell and the Wall. We literally hear that line.
The North must stand ready. Winter is coming.
And this is brought up in multiple scenes throughout the episode.
There's a chill in the air. Summer is well and truly through.
1/10 of them taken by the crown on the cusp of winter.
We are at the cusp of war, on the cusp of winter, and as we saw in the main series, war severely depletes the resources that the common people need to survive the winter. There is impending death and doom in many ways. Another theme of this episode is the unseen threat. Aegon and everyone else in King's Landing is so focused on the skies, on dragon attacks, on the scorpions, that they miss the threats right under their feet. Cheese is like wandering around through the castle throughout the episode, and no one notices him. The small folk are basically invisible to the higher classes until they start causing trouble, and many of those issues could have been avoided if the people in power paid basic attention to the needs of their people. Another theme is the uncontrollable nature of a violent force. We saw this with Aemond and Vhagar at the end of the last season, where he pointed a super weapon at someone, but then was unable to stop it once the events have been set in motion. Likewise, in this episode, Rhaenyra unleashes Daemon, who unleashes these 2 assassins, and the consequences spiral out of control, out of what at least Rhaenyra initially intended. I think Daemon's intentions are more up for debate. And obviously, the murder of Jaehaerys will have dire consequences for this conflict going forward. Okay, now for a couple brief spoilery things. This is your spoiler warning. You've been warned. I liked the scene between Aegon and his boys discussing what his "the" is going to be, because we know ultimately that Aegon II is the only Aegon who doesn't actually get a moniker. This was partly because he spent so little time actually in power because he was incapacitated at Rook's Rest, and goes to show how you do not control how you're remembered by history. I also loved them bringing in Hugh Hammer this early, and it looks like they have also cast an actress playing his wife, so we're going to get more of his story, which I'm very interested to see. It's another perspective of the small folk. Hugh does awful things during the war, but due to the unreliable narrator historical aspect of Fire and Blood and the tendency of the higher classes to demonize the small folk, we do not know what aspects of his character were actually true. Also, I loved that his beard is kind of bronzy, but going gray. Very Vermithor coated. Can't wait to see more of Vermithor. Seems like a little cutie. Also, like I mentioned earlier, there was a ton of talk of Harrenhal. And I'm so excited for Harrenhal, you guys. I'm guessing we probably won't get there till episode 3. It seems like dream sequences will be heavily featured in this season, and possibly for characters outside of Harrenhal at this time. One of the shots in the trailer that's actually the thumbnail of the trailer is this close-up of Aemond's face, and it's like super brightly and dreamily lit, so maybe he's gonna be having some Alice Rivers dreams. I cannot wait for Alice Rivers, you guys. Be prepared for me to become completely unhinged. You thought I was unhinged before? You haven't seen anything yet. And the other seed for the future that was planted in this episode that I wanted to talk about is the eventual Daemon v. Aemond showdown. In this episode, we see that Daemon does not want to face Aemond on his own. There would have been the risk of him being recognized if he had gone himself to try to kill Aemond, but that risk might have been worthwhile. We saw that no one really took a second look at Blood or Cheese when they were just walking through the castle. He probably could have disguised himself. We also hear him say in this episode that he can't face vhagar alone. So maybe his final acceptance of a one-on-one, or I guess a two-on-two fight against Aemond and vhagar will be penance for this mistake, that he should have just gone and faced his nephew himself from the start. Alright, that's it. I am really excited for the next one. I think it's going to be a doozy. And still, not a single word about Darren. Like and subscribe. Okay, thanks. Bye.